Okay, hi, this is my review for the final exam. Um, and you can find it either in the modules the last week, it'll be there, or you can go to quizzes and then, it'll say critical thinking final examination. There are now 607 points for it, which is a lot. 100 points will be the essay. There's just one essay. Um, I'm asking for 3 paragraphs, explaining what you've learned in the class. And there are 80 questions otherwise. It's loading really slow, like mad slow. So, um, you know, initially, all the questions are logical fallacies, right? So you have the tu quoque, and you or you two first. You have the no true Scotsman. Oh, you're not really this, so you're not really that. Um, red herring is when somebody throws something out there. It really has nothing to do with the argument to kind of throw you off. Um, ad hominem, attacking the person, right? This kind of fallacy. Um, so straw man is where you create an argument where you're not really, you know, addressing. You you basically you just you kind of change the issue and argue against the new issue, basically. Um, okay, slippery slope. It starts at one point and it just goes really quickly um, to some crazy place. Basically, bandwagon. Everybody jumps on the bandwagon. They join a whatever it is. You see this with teams. You see this with a lot of things. Trends. Okay, so those are easy. Logical appeal to authority. Right, more doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. If you use this aging cream, you look like this famous beauty star. Um, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. False cause. So this is where you think that something causes something else. It's a problem with causation or causality, and it's a big one. And Western philosophy loaded questions like have you stopped cheating on your tests or something like that, where it has some kind of loaded claim that makes you look guilty or something like that. Okay, special pleading is where you kind of move the goalposts and ask for. Okay, so gambler's fallacy. You think your luck is going some way, so um, it'll keep doing it. Or you had really bad luck, so you think you have good luck now, something like that. That's gambler's fallacy. Black or white fallacy. It's either good or evil. It's one way or the other. There's no middle ground. You're either for us or against us. Um, anecdotal. An anecdote is where you tell a little story, to illustrate something. And the thing is, with evidence, you want factual evidence, like logos, right? You want something that's logical, and so um, yeah, that's not that. Okay, the Texas sharpshooter, right? There's the image. Help you to remember that one. Um, it's basically like where you pick the data to reinforce your point. Um, and it's a way of falsely arguing. Um, the middle ground fallacy is that you say you're in the middle, so you're right. You're not on either side of the extremes. I think a good comic, if you put all the kittens in the blender, um, one side wants to put all the kittens in the blender, one side doesn't want to put any in the blender, and So the middle ground is you put half the kittens in the blender, and that's just still wrong. I think most people, unless you're going to grow up to be a serial killer, would think that. So this middle ground fallacy. Appeal to emotion. Um, this is what people do this all the time, right? Kind of pathos, right? Um, how people feel, and that feeling must be true. Uh, fallacy. Just because it's a fallacy doesn't mean that it's wrong. That's just because it fits the pattern of logic of fallacy doesn't mean it's actually untrue. Uh, incredulity is when you don't, you're like incredulous. You can't believe something. So argument from incredulity is like, well, I can't believe it's true, so it can't be true. That's a personal incredulity fallacy. Um, burden of proof. The burden of proof is on the person making a claim, but with the burden of proof is where you switch it to the other person. And they have good comics illustrating that. Ambiguity. You use double meaning or ambiguity of language to mislead or misrepresent the truth. Ambiguity fallacy. Um, the fallacy of composition is where you try to take something, from a part and apply it to the whole. So if one person is standing up to watch the game better, then everybody can all see better if they're standing when, and obviously they're going to block other people or whatever. So that's the composition division fallacy. Um, the genetic fallacy is where you judge something as either good or bad on the basis of where it came from or from whom it came from. And circular argument, begging the question. It used to be in English classes, we used to correct this. We'd say begging the question is not, like, people use it to raise an issue. They'll say, oh, that begs the question, blah, blah, blah. But in actuality, that's not how it works. Begging the question is a circular argument. It is where, the word of Zorba the Greed is flawless and perfect. We know this because it says so in the great and infallible book of Zorbo's best and most truest things that are definitely true and should not ever be questioned. It's true because I say so, that kind of thing. Um, appeal to nature, right? Everything is better if it's natural, right? That's a fallacy. And so, there's plenty of things that are poisonous in nature, right? So appeal to nature fallacy. And then 26, we get into um, questions on our readings. Henry David Thoreau, um, right? He protested. He didn't pay taxes for 6 years in an act of civil disobedience to protest the Mexican-American War and the Fugitive Slave Act. He saw the Mexican-American War as unjust, and that it was an attempt for pro-slavery people to, grab more land. And he refused to pay his taxes for 6 years. And he went to jail because of that. Only for a night. Somebody paid his bail. He didn't want them to, but Emerson said the United States will conquer Mexico, but will be as the man swallows arsenic, which brings him down in turn. So Emerson, who was a mentor for Thoreau and many other literary and philosophical figures in transcendentalist movement in Massachusetts in the middle of the 19th century, he he felt that the Mexican American War was for pro slavery. Mexico had abolished slavery, and that slavery was a poison. It was injustice. Yeah, I like teaching on these his people in American history because they were actually kind of righteous people. Thoreau more than Emerson. Emerson had some bigotry in him as far as he didn't like slavery, but he also believed that white Anglo-Saxon people were superior to other Europeans and other people in general, which I think is just kind of childish. So the law will never make men free. It is men who have to make the law free, who have got to make the law free. That is Henry David Thoreau. Anyone in a free society where the laws are unjust has an obligation to break the law. This is powerful stuff, and it influences Gandhi, rising up against the British in India, and it later influences King. Um, King's April 4th, 1967, Beyond Vietnam, A Time to Break the Silence speech. He calls the United States the greatest, the U.S. government, the greatest purveyor of violence in the world. And, I put the quote right there. The greatest purveyor of violence in the world, my own government, I cannot be silent. Right? So here, um, we have the United States is less than, as shown in the 13th. There's a transition to the 13th doc. We have less than 5% of the world's population, but we have 25% of the world's prison population. And that kind of shows you who incarcerates the most in the world. Though I think China should be more because they do have like 1 million Uyghur in prison who are Muslims of Turkish descent in the West, in the new province of Xinjiang. Yeah, 5%, 20, or I'm sorry, 5% of the world's population, 25% of the enslaved peoples. The 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution abolished slavery, except as a punishment for a crime. That's what the movie The 13th was about. How that led to like the new Jim Crow and stuff. According to the 13th, lifetime likelihood of imprisonment for black men is 1 in 3. And this gives you some other statistics of how more likely they are to be convicted of murder, sexual assault, drug crime, innocent. And it gives you the National Registry of exonerations there. The Southern strategy, as covered in the 13th, was how Nixon basically got a whole bunch of what they call Dixiecrats, right? Remember, like in the Civil War, the Republicans were in the North and they were anti-slavery and they won the war. A lot of the Democrats were in the South and they continue to be pro-slavery and pro-racist for a real long time. Even Woodrow Wilson, for example, was a Democrat. And so to get these Southern voters to join the Democrat Dixiecrats to join the Republicans, he implemented what he called his Southern strategy, which uses a lot of coded racism, law and order, instead of just saying straight racist things. So the Jim Crow era, the Jim Crow lasted for about 100 years. Jim Crow laws. Emmett Till was the black teen and was murdered in 1955 under false pretenses. Right. Birth of a Nation. That was the first movie shown in the White House. Woodrow Wilson, who said it was like history written with lightning. One of the highest grossing films of all time. While black men 1 out of 3 will spend a year in incarceration, as it says here. White men, it's 1 in 17. Latino men, it's 1 in 6. Again, like sorry, that's the wrong. It's pretty important to notice. Notice that black women and women commit way less crimes than men. I mean, the prison population is pretty small comparatively. Are about the same as white men, black women. Okay. So here, the Third World Movement, like the First World was, and this is in Chomsky in the beginning. The first world is the developed world, right? Rich, industrialized Western countries, mostly Western, and Japan, right? At the time. Um, the second world was the communists. The third world was those who said we don't want to align with either one. We're the third category, and it was a kind of anti-colonial. And there was a scholar from Guyana who wrote a book, lots of books, but one of them, and he was actually assassinated, um, was how Europe underdeveloped Africa. So, you can look at not just Africa, but how this was done in a lot of regions and a lot of continents and countries. Okay, in the 60s, there was a Chicano movement, overall Latino movements, including Puerto Rican and Boricua. Um, Things like you had the Black Panthers with Black folk, and you had like the Latin Kings with um, Puerto Ricans. And as mentioned in Luis Rodriguez's Always Running, he was 16 at the time of the Chicano moratorium against the Vietnam War. One of the greatest protests of Latinos um, and Chicanos in the country. And they talked about internal colonialism, that people could be, I mean, obviously, say Native Americans, and a lot of the roots of Latino people are Native roots, that they talked about internal colonialism. The Chicano movement talked about internal colonialism. Okay, so this is not, like meant to be a hard question. The U.S. border with Mexico extends for nearly 2,000 miles and is the longest meeting point between a rich and a poor country in the world. Uh, this is just within a time period, like showing in Arizona, right? These are toe tags, like for dead bodies, and they made a graph of immigrant deaths in that time period. Oh, okay. So for for this one, and it should shuffle your questions. Uh-oh. I have 41. Oh, okay, no, it's cool. Sorry. Why did it say 42 on this and 41 on the? I have a problem with how this is aligning. Um, so the U.S. border. So basically, the U.S. Border Control has recorded over 7,000 migrant deaths from 1998 to 2020. In 2020, there were 227 recorded migrant deaths. Pretty important, just to get an idea of the cost of this, I think. Um, okay. Harvest of Empire. Um, one of the things it talks about is the overthrow of the democratically elected government in Guatemala. And I put in a painting from the famous Mexican artist Diego Rivera, an explanation of it. Our cultures, our resistance, repression, refuge, and healing in Guatemala. The Nobel Prize winning Mayan activist Rigoberta Menchú, just to help. So in 1954, the CIA overthrew the government of Guatemala and intervened like over and over in Guatemala, like in a bad way. This next question is talking about how President Hoover deported nearly 1 million Mexicans and Mexican Americans in the 1930s. I have two questions on that. This is about Tommy Smith, and that he lived in Lemoore for a while, quite a while, and then he was treated really bad when he came back. Um, So, the idea of Harvest of Empire is that there is, people migrate for certain reasons, and some of these reasons have to do with, U.S. actions, and that includes coups, overthrowing of countries, governments. And this gives you a little bit of an example. You can look at each of those, you can make it bigger, whatever. Cuba, 1954, I'm sorry, 1961, Bay of Pigs, and all of these. There's a whole bunch. There's so many times. It's not even once. You know. Oh yeah. So they give you how many? They give you like a number of U.S. invasions, military interventions since 1890. So how many times did they send? Actually, we send actual military, let alone CIA ops or other things. So, U.S. supported coup in Honduras, 2009, and millions of millions of undocumented parents from these countries in the blank whose children are desecrated. Oh, in the U.S. So just yeah. So it's U.S. for both of those. Um, so citizenship historically was denied to Asians by the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. These are some like kind of newspaper pictures from the time. Um, the giant thing. Um, okay. Most recently, states have established laws against brown-skinned undocumented blank, including 2010, which when outlawed Arizona teachings on ethnic history and culture from a Chicano studies program. They banned it. It was overturned later, but it took 7 years. Um, okay. So this is like a really strong image that almost went back. It looks like it's going back to slavery times with whipping of Haitians at the border. And these are some of the books that were prohibited in Arizona to read. And there's a big thing, they're doing that again. So there's many laws against brown-skinned undocumented immigrants or migrants, and um, if you had temporary status, legal status, then they could take it away, and then you're undocumented again, which people will call illegal. The lynching of Mexican Americans. This was done. This is mentioned in another like reading I gave you from Elise Rodriguez, talking about the Mexican American War, and then in the aftermath of it. Um, Thereafter, Mexicans and their progeny, their children, were more frequently lynched than any other group except for African Americans. And he says this fate befell upwards around 1,000 people, mostly in Texas. The CNN or the Time article I gave you from cites this book, "The Injustice Never Leaves You," um, and that on anti-Mexican violence in Texas, which says that there were over 5,000 lynchings and murders and massacres from 1915 to 1920 alone in Texas, done by rangers and others. This is a lynching in 1877 of Mexicans in Santa Cruz. There's a whole history of this if you want to read on it. A couple other histories and a couple other images. So something, unfortunately, it's not nice, but it's not taught. Mexicans were also the most subject to segregation after blacks. They won court cases to help end school segregation, like 1947's Mendez versus Westminster, which was here in California. In the 1930s, during the Great Depression, around 1 million Mexicans were repatriated to Mexico, even though 60% were reportedly U.S. citizens. After U.S. blacks, police have killed disproportionately more Mexicans and their descendants, as well as Puerto Ricans, Central Americans, and Dominicans than any other group. So these are kind of that is Mendez, and this is really as important as Brown versus Board of Education, and it was used as a basis for Brown. And Thurgood Marshall, who argued that, and later was a member of the Supreme Court, said that. Okay, I'll move quickly through the Malcolm X stuff, I think. Malcolm X and Martin Luther King were both 39 when they were murdered. So Malcolm became anti-capitalist, especially when he was able to verbalize his anti-capitalism the last year of his life, when he breaks with the nation in March of 1964. He met with Castro, he met with Che, and met with other communists and socialists around the world. He connected capitalism to racism. He said you can't have capitalism without racism. And that capitalism was like a vulture that can only suck the blood of the helpless. And the rise of modern capitalism, European capitalism, rapacious capitalism with no apologies, it began with the taking of indigenous land and the slave trade of Africans. First chapter of Malcolm X, Nightmare. Okay. Both Malcolm's father and mother worked for the Jamaican black nationalist Marcus Garvey, his Universal Negro Improvement Association. Malcolm was born in Omaha, Nebraska. This shows you a march in Omaha, Nebraska, the year Malcolm was born, 1925. This is a flyer for a Klan meeting in Lincoln, Nebraska, another place in Nebraska. So this is the environment that he's growing up in, or he's born into. Malcolm's mother was from Grenada. That shouldn't be a hard question because, it says Grenada right there. Just so you know, pretty close to South America, right? Pretty south in the Caribbean islands. Malcolm's father is murdered by white supremacists, according to Malcolm and the family lore. His mother tries to take care of 8 kids alone and eventually has a mental breakdown, which makes sense. I mean, and she's put in a mental institution for some time. And he talks about how, the first chapter, how, state agency destroyed his family. Really important point about Malcolm's life is he does, he's doing great in mascot, right? He's a mascot in 8th grade. He's a model student. He's class president. But his white English teacher tells him that being a lawyer is no realistic goal for an N-word, and that really turns him off from education. He decides to, go live with his half-sister, Ella, in Boston at that point. And pretty soon, gets into street life and hustling. And in Boston, that's a picture of him with his sister Ella in Boston at 15. He's about 6'4" at 15 already, so he looks a lot older than he is. Ends up being 6'5". Chapter 3, homeboy, he meets Malcolm Jarvis, Shorty Jarvis, and they're both, locked up. Malcolm was 15 when he bought his first zoot suit, right? Real interesting kind of connections between Chicano, Filipino, and black culture there, and there was music for all three groups to that kind of were interwoven too. A conch is a hairstyle where they straighten the hair, pull it back, imitates white hairstyles. What eventually happens to Laura after Malcolm leaves her for Sophia? Uh, this is displaying weird, but that's Malcolm X and Laura, which wasn't her real name. That was Betty in the movie, and this is this is the actual Sophia here. There's mug shots of her too. She was actually Armenian. So Laura ends up, a drug addict and a prostitute, and Malcolm kind of blames himself if you read chapter 4, Laura. Now, Malcolm's thug life really takes off. Like he becomes a serious kind of thug in Harlem, and where he meets a lot of OGs and all that other stuff. You know, why does Malcolm tell a psychiatrist he wants to lead Southern blacks in murdering Southern whites? He tells him he wants to organize some N-word soldiers, steal some guns, and kill us crackers. He wants to avoid the draft for World War II. He's trying to avoid it. Malcolm gets caught. It's not like in the movie where the police roll up on them and he's doing a conk. And no, he goes to he has a really expensive watch that he stole. He goes to uh, take it to a repair shop kind of stupidly, and he gets busted because of that. The undercovers are waiting for him. Okay, in 46, Malcolm is sentenced to 8 to 10 years for armed robbery. Served 6.5 years at Charleston's Massachusetts State Prison and Norfolk Prison Colony. He was 21. And he says that his real crime was not, the robberies and stuff. It was actually the fact that they were both him and he was with Sophia, and Shorty was with her sister. That they were middle class white women. They got sentences 8 to 10 years all to run concurrently. They were actually Armenian too, but white women. 48 to 49, Malcolm converts to NOI while he's in prison. In 1953, he changes. Malcolm gets his X. No more Malcolm Little, that slave name. Little, that was inherited from the slave owners who owned his ancestors. He gets the X variable to symbolize that his true name has been lost. As did, Cassius Clay became first Cassius X and then Muhammad Ali. Late 50s, Malcolm travels to the Middle East and Africa, and he starts to see the African American struggle in a global context, not just looking at the U.S. I mean, he had read about it, but it's different. Um, when Kennedy was assassinated in '63, Malcolm kind of called it, basically kind of what do you expect when the U.S. wages violence all over the world, including against black people in the streets, then the violence would come back on you. And he was silenced for that, and probably for other things. He leaves the Nation of Islam in 1964 and announces it in March. And in April, he goes on Hajj. He goes on the pilgrimage. And then changes his name to El Hajj al Malik Shabazz. Again, there's another question. There's another kind of question, which the answer is Hajj, but it's also just a, you know, there's a couple of things that lead him to look at the brotherhood of man, and a lot of that is interacting with Muslims, and then also other Africans who are revolutionaries but aren't necessarily black Africans, like in Algeria, um, where he meets the leaders of that revolution against the French. Um, on Valentine's Day in 1965, his home is firebombed, and he has only a week to live. He's murdered less than 7 days after that, or 7 days after. February 1965, Malcolm is assassinated. He began speaking at the Audubon Ballroom. Pictures from his funeral, prayers over him, and then the burial. Um, and this is about John Brown, who's, the answers are both John Brown, who sacrificed everything to try and help free black people. Like, he fought against it, and he lost. Two of his sons were killed fighting against racism, slavery. So, essay, 100 points, 3 paragraphs. Over the course of this semester, beginning with our first readings from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s Beyond Vietnam, The Time to Break the Silence, and Howard Zinn writing on Thoreau and Civil Disobedience, and continuing through the autobiography of Malcolm X, Harvest of Empire, They Take Our Jobs, and 20 Other Myths About Immigration, all the other videos and, music and all the other just material. It can be anything in the course that you've brought up, I've brought up, whatever, right? You've been asked to critically examine works of literature, art, documentaries, speeches, our society, history, the geopolitical realities of colonialism, institutional racism, social injustice, mass incarceration, immigration, and war. You've written on many social justice issues expressed in myriad forms through authors who date back to the origins of writing itself. Well, not so much ancient stuff, but up to the present day. You've been asked to think critically about what they've said and what they say. So, in an essay of at least 3 paragraphs in length, explain how this class has augmented, expanded, or otherwise affected your exercise of critical thinking using at least 3 examples of literature or any other works you've been exposed to during this semester. I would like you to mention the works you felt were most compelling or interesting, or those that you will remember for a long time and perhaps teach others, but do not worry excessively about MLA format, in-text citation, etc. No works cited, page needed. It's not a research paper, but if it's a quote, put it in quotes. Don't plagiarize, right? It's 100 points, and it's been an honor reading your words and listening to your voices over the semester and the semester before. So that's my review. I was hoping to do it in less than 40 minutes, but it's up there now. So when you should be able to um, no, it's not going to really grade, but um, you should be able to use this for a really good review if you missed like one of the days, of course. Okay. Okay. I think that's it. Um, Hope this is helpful. It's nice working with you.